I freeze in the doorway of my parents' dining room, my hand still gripping the brass doorknob. The scene before me unfolds like a surreal painting. My sister Lindsay stands beside a lavish display of printed recipe pages, her name emblazoned across each header in elegant script. 3 local food bloggers hover around her like satellites, their cameras flashing, notepads poised. My mother Patricia beams at Lindsay's side in her pearl necklace and pressed linen blouse, while my father Robert stands nearby, chest puffed with pride. But those recipes, I recognize every single one of them. My heart pounds against my ribs as my eyes travel across familiar titles: blackberry sage crumble, Northwest seafood stew with saffron broth, hazelnut chicken with wild mushroom sauce, 7 years of late nights, hundreds of dollars spent on ingredients I could barely afford, burns, cuts, and calluses earned through countless hours of testing and refining. Oh good, you made it. Mom spots me and waves me in with the practiced enthusiasm she reserves for public appearances. Come see what we've put together for Lindsay's big cookbook announcement. My feet move forward without my permission. The room suddenly feels too warm, too small. Dad gestures proudly toward the display. 7 years of family recipes, finally getting published. Lindsay's cookbook will put our family name on the culinary map. The bloggers turn to look at me, their expressions curious but polite. One of them, an older woman with salt and pepper hair tucked into a loose bun, studies me with particular interest. Lindsay clears her throat and continues what sounds like a rehearsed speech. Cooking has always been my passion. These recipes represent my journey from amateur home cook to developing my own unique culinary voice. Each dish tells a story. Those are my recipes, I say. The words come out quiet but firm. Every single one of them. The room falls silent. 5 pairs of eyes turn to stare at me. In that moment, memories flash through my mind like a fevered slideshow. Nights in my tiny apartment kitchen, testing the blackberry crumble recipe 14 times until the balance of sage was perfect. The shared family cloud drive where Mom insisted I store my recipe files for safekeeping. Lindsay's sudden interest last year in helping organize my digital recipe collection. I remember standing proudly at a local cooking competition last spring, holding a blue ribbon for my hazelnut chicken, only to hear Mom say to another contestant's mother, "Lindsay guided her. Lindsay's the one with real talent." I recall how family gatherings gradually stopped, including questions about my cookbook progress, how they changed the subject whenever I mentioned submission deadlines or editor feedback. My mother's smile doesn't falter, but her eyes harden. She glides toward me and places a firm hand on my shoulder. "Don't make a scene," she whispers, her voice sweet but threaded with warning. "This is Lindsay's moment. Why can't you be happy for your sister?" Before I can respond, Dad appears at my other side. His fingers dig into my elbow as he steers me toward the hallway. "We've invested good money in this publishing deal," he mutters through clenched teeth. "Don't ruin this for the family." I pull away from his grip, surprisingly steady despite the trembling I feel inside. Lindsay steps forward, her eyes wide with practiced innocence. "I thought we were doing this together, Kristen. You know I've always supported your cooking." The bloggers exchange uncomfortable glances. The older woman with the salt and pepper hair catches my eye, a question forming on her lips. For a moment I waver. This is my family. The people who shaped me, raised me, whose approval I've sought my entire life. Walking away would be easier. Letting Lindsay have this moment would avoid the impending explosion. But then I think about the nights I worked double shifts as a waitress to afford saffron for my seafood stew. The mornings I woke at 4 a.m. to test pastry recipes before my teaching assistant job at the culinary school. The journal entries documenting each evolution of recipes that came from my heart, my hands, my history. I straighten my spine. I need to show you all something. I walk out to my car, aware of the tension building behind me like an approaching storm. When I return with my laptop, the family's posture has changed. Mom busies herself offering coffee to the bloggers, her movements jerky and precise. Dad stands by the window, arms crossed over his chest. Lindsay perches on the edge of a dining chair, fingers twisting the pearls at her neck, a nervous habit she's had since childhood. I notice the contrast between us as I set my laptop on the table. Lindsay in her crisp white blouse and tailored slacks, her nails perfectly manicured. Me in practical jeans and a simple button-down, my hands bearing the small scars and calluses of someone who actually cooks. I open my email and locate what I'm looking for. My hands remain steady, though my heart races. 7 years of work, my history, my future. I turn the screen around so everyone can see. My cookbook releases in 10 days. I say, pointing to the publishing contract with my name on it. These are my copyrighted recipes, and I have the documentation to prove it. The bloggers lean forward, their interest visibly shifting from Lindsay to me. The older woman with the salt and pepper hair pulls out her phone and begins taking photos of my screen. Mom's face drains of color. Dad takes a half step forward, then stops, unsure what to do next. Lindsay looks from me to Mom, her confidence crumbling. "Mom?" she whispers. "What's going on?" Before anyone can answer, my phone rings. I check the screen, my lawyer, right on schedule. "I should take this," I say, picking up my phone. It's about the cease and desist letter that was just delivered. I place my laptop on the dining table with deliberate calm, though my fingers tremble slightly as I open the lid. The three food bloggers lean forward, their curiosity palpable in the sudden silence. "Let me show you what 7 years of work looks like," I say, pulling up a folder labeled Recipe Development Timeline. The first photo appears on screen, me in my tiny apartment kitchen, dated exactly 7 years ago, surrounded by 15 variations of blackberry crumble, my hair dusted with flour, eyes bloodshot from testing until 3 a.m. I scroll through hundreds more photos, each meticulously dated and annotated. I have over 3,000 development photos. I explain, voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Every test, every failure, every success. Next, I open my email folder. Here's my correspondence with Westbrook Publishing from last year. I turn the screen so everyone can see. Note the timestamp and contract details. Patricia lunges forward, attempting to shut my laptop. "This is just a misunderstanding," she says, her voice honeyed but eyes flashing with panic. "We can work this out privately, as a family." "I think you should all leave," Dad says to the bloggers, puffing up his chest. "This is a private family matter." The woman with salt and pepper hair, Diane, according to her press badge, stays firmly in place. "Actually, I'd like to hear more." She looks at me with unexpected kindness. "Don't you want to know the real story behind these recipes?" I nod, grateful for the ally, and continue opening files. My fingers fly over the keyboard as I pull up my copyright filings from last year, video diary entries of my cooking process, and finally, the financial spreadsheet that tracks every dollar I've spent developing these recipes. I worked double shifts at Franklin's Bistro for 3 years to afford ingredients. I say, pointing to the meticulous records. Saffron for the seafood stew alone cost 2 weeks' wages. I lived on ramen to afford vanilla beans from Madagascar. I click on another file, Lindsay's credit card statements, which Mom and Dad always paid. Meanwhile, Lindsay's recipe development consisted of shopping sprees at Williams-Sonoma and Instagram photo shoots with food she didn't cook. Lindsay's face crumples. "I can't do this anymore, Mom," she sobs, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "We shouldn't have taken her recipes." Mom's perfectly manicured hand grips Lindsay's arm. "Be quiet," she hisses. But Lindsay continues, words tumbling out. "I tried to cook like Kristen, I really did. But I can't. I never could. I don't have her talent." The admission hangs in the air for a moment before Lindsay's tears miraculously dry up. She straightens her posture and lowers her voice to a wounded whisper. "I only went along because Mom and Dad insisted. They said you were wasting your talent, that someone needed to do something with these recipes." "That's enough, Lindsay," Mom snaps before turning to me, voice softening to that persuasive tone I've known all my life. "Everything we do is for this family, Kristen. You've always been so independent, while Lindsay needed our support." Her words hit their familiar target, the part of me that's always felt like the difficult child, the one who never quite fit the family mold. "We just thought Lindsay would be a better face for the brand." Mom continues, "You've always been so, behind the scenes." "Behind the scenes?" I repeat, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. "You mean doing the actual work?" Dad clears his throat. "Your college fund financed this publishing deal," he says, as if that justifies everything. "It was an investment in the family name." My college fund? The revelation hits me like a physical blow. The money Grandma left specifically for my education? Before anyone can respond, Diane stands up. "I've followed Kristen's recipe development on her blog for years," she announces to the room. "I recognize these dishes. That seafood stew won the Cascadia cooking competition last spring." My phone chimes with a text, then another, and another. I glance down to see messages flooding in from my cooking class students. "Just heard about your cookbook. Can't wait. Will you sign my copy? So proud of you. Your wild mushroom sauce changed my life. The support feels like a lifeline thrown into churning waters. The front door opens, and a balding man in an expensive suit enters. Patricia, what's this emergency? He notices the tense scene and hesitates. Howard, thank God you're here, Mom says to their family lawyer. We need to stop this cookbook situation immediately. Howard glances at my laptop screen, then at the contract displayed there. His expression shifts. Patricia, you didn't mention Kristen already has a publishing deal. With Westbrook, no less. He adjusts his glasses nervously. That's problematic for what you've arranged with Lindsay. Mom's face hardens. You'll regret choosing this path over your family, she says to me, voice low. No one will want your cookbook when they hear how you've treated your sister. Dad steps closer, lowering his voice. There could be legal complications if you don't back down, Kristen. Think about what you're doing. Lindsay's tears return on cue. This will ruin my reputation in the community, she wails. Everyone thinks I'm publishing a cookbook. As if summoned by her words, Mom's phone rings. She answers, her face growing paler by the second. Yes, Mr. Branson, I understand. No, we weren't aware. Yes, a cease and desist letter. She hangs up, glaring at me. The Vanity Press is threatening to sue us for breach of contract. The Revan Press the setting the cat of where. The bloggers exchange glances, then pull out their phones, capturing images of my evidence. The youngest one mouths, "Thank you," when our eyes meet. With sudden clarity, I open my cloud drive settings and begin revoking access. One by one, I remove their names, Mom, Dad, Lindsay watching, as their permission to my life's work disappears with simple clicks. From now on, none of my recipes leave my hands without a contract. I announce, voice steadier than I feel. The weight of what I'm doing settles over me. This isn't just about recipes anymore. It's about years of dismissal, of being valued only for what I could provide, never for who I am. I close my laptop and stand, shoulders straight, despite the tears threatening to spill. The family that raised me watches with expressions ranging from fury to shock to calculation. I'm done being invisible, I whisper, more to myself than to them, and walk toward the door. Behind me, I hear the distinctive sound of cameras clicking, documenting the moment when everything changed. 2 days later, the phone rings for the third time this morning. I let it go to voicemail, just like the previous 7 calls from various family friends. My kitchen counter is covered with printed recipes, each one bearing my handwritten notes in the margins. Steam rises from a pot of Northwest seafood stew, the saffron broth filling my tiny apartment with its distinctive aroma. The voicemail notification chimes. I tap the speaker button while whisking cream into a reduction sauce. Kristen, it's Aunt Carol. Your mother called me yesterday, quite upset. She says you're having some kind of breakdown over Lindsay's cookbook. Honey, family recipes belong to everyone. Call me back so we can talk some sense into you. I stab the delete button with more force than necessary. My aunt hasn't cooked anything more complicated than a casserole in 30 years. She wouldn't know my blackberry sage crumble from a box mix. My phone pings with a notification. Lindsay has posted on Instagram again. So grateful for all the family culinary traditions that shape these recipes. Can't wait to share our collective passion with the world. The photo shows her manicured hands sprinkling herbs onto my hazelnut chicken. 18 likes already, including comments from Mom's Bridge Club ladies praising Lindsay's creativity. The wooden spoon snaps in my grip. I toss the broken pieces into the trash and grab another. Dad called my publisher yesterday. Margaret phoned immediately afterward, her voice tight with concern. Your father claimed you've been emotionally unstable since your grandmother died. Said we should delay publication until you've had proper treatment. Her derisive snort told me exactly what she thought of that suggestion. The stew bubbles, ready for tasting. I lift a spoonful to my lips. The flavors transport me instantly to the Oregon coast, to weekends spent gathering fresh mussels with my grandmother, her patient instructions on how to balance seafood with spices. What does this dish say to you, Kristen? She'd ask, watching me taste. This stew says me, not my family name. Not some manufactured Asher culinary legacy. It speaks of 14 attempts to perfect the saffron ratio. It remembers the December night I sold my grandmother's silver bracelet to afford fresh scallops when my waitressing tips fell short. I ladle the stew into storage containers, methodically labeling each one with the date and batch number. My kitchen whiteboard now holds a schedule. 1 recipe per day, 72 recipes total, each prepared exactly as written in my manuscript. Each one photographed, documented, and tasted. Each one mine. Margaret suggested adding personal stories to the recipes. Something Lindsay could never fabricate, she said with steel in her voice. Your connection to these dishes is what makes them special. The afternoon slips away as I write the story of the seafood stew coastal trips with grandmother. Her knowing smile when I first balanced the herbs correctly. The restaurant chef who offered me a job after tasting my version. A knock at the door interrupts my typing. 3 sharp raps, hesitant. Not Mom's imperious rhythm or Dad's authoritative pounding. I open the door to find Lindsay standing in the hallway, her perfect blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her eyes are red-rimmed. She's wearing jeans and a plain sweater, not her usual carefully curated outfit. Can I come in? She asks, her voice small. I step aside without speaking. She enters, her gaze darting around my kitchen like she's never seen it before. Perhaps she hasn't, not really. The hanging copper pots, the knife rack with my carefully maintained collection, the industrial mixer I bought secondhand from a bakery that closed. Lindsay's fingers trail over my recipe notebook. It smells amazing in here. I'm testing recipes. My recipes. She flinches at the emphasis but doesn't contradict me. Progress, I suppose. Mom's been making phone calls, she says, settling onto a bar stool at my counter. She's telling everyone you're having some kind of jealous breakdown. I noticed. I check the timer on my phone and pull a tray of roasted hazelnuts from the oven. The rich aroma fills the kitchen as I shake the tray, letting the nuts cool. Dad tried to call your publisher. Lindsay watches me work, her eyes following my movements. I know that too. I begin chopping the hazelnuts, the knife moving in a steady rhythm. Lindsay's shoulders slump. They're in full damage control mode. The Vanity Press publisher is threatening to sue for breach of contract. Let them. The knife comes down with more force than necessary. Their contract was with you, not me. I never even wanted this, Lindsay whispers. Her fingers pleat the edge of my kitchen towel, folding and unfolding the fabric. I've always known I couldn't cook like you. Mom said you'd never do anything with your talent anyway. The knife pauses mid-chop. That wasn't your decision to make. Or hers. Lindsay's eyes fill with tears. I can't even make half these recipes. I just know how to make them look pretty for photos. The confession hangs between us, an unexpected moment of truth in years of competition and pretense. Before I can respond, there's another knock at the door. This one is firm and purposeful. Margaret enters with a stack of proofs under her arm, her silver hair swept up in a practical bun. She stops short at the sight of Lindsay, her eyebrows rising toward her hairline. Am I interrupting? She asks, her tone making it clear she doesn't particularly care if she .island. We were just talking. I say, taking the proofs from her. Lindsay, this is Margaret, my editor. Lindsay stands, suddenly awkward. I should go. Stay, I say, surprising myself. You should hear this. Margaret spreads the proofs across my counter, carefully avoiding the cooling hazelnuts. We've added 16 pages for your personal stories. The design team loves the concept, each recipe with its true origin story. She taps a sample page where my handwritten notes appear alongside the printed recipe. Your voice comes through so clearly here. Authentic. Unmistakable. Lindsay stares at the proofs, her expression unreadable. My phone buzzes with a text from Chef Thomas. Reserve the restaurant for your book launch. Next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Invited every food critic in Portland. Time to show them what real cooking looks like. Margaret notices my smile. Good news? Chef Thomas is hosting my book launch at his restaurant. Lindsay's head snaps up. Thomas Keller? From Laurel? He's been my mentor at the cooking school for 3 years, I say. Margaret taps another page. The food blogger Diane? Her preliminary piece about you has already gone viral in culinary circles. People are talking about the cookbook everyone will be using versus the cookbook nobody needed. Lindsay flinches. My phone rings again. I check the screen, a Portland number I don't recognize. Kristen Asher? This is Ellen Michaels from Northwest Cuisine magazine. We'd like to feature you and your cookbook in next month's issue. Your approach to regional ingredients has our editorial team very excited. I schedule the interview as Lindsay watches, her expression shifting from shock to something more complex. When I hang up, she says. The Vanity publisher backed out this morning. Said something about copyright infringement and not wanting the liability. She takes a deep breath. I never wanted to be the cooking sister anyway. Mom decided that's who I was supposed to be after you started winning those competitions in high school. For the first time, I really look at my sister not as my competitor or betrayer, but as another person caught in our mother's web of expectations. What did you want to be? I ask. She blinks, startled by the question. A photographer, actually. I love food styling and presentation. But Mom said that wasn't prestigious enough unless I was the chef too. Margaret watches our exchange with shrewd eyes before gathering her things. I'll leave you two to talk. Kristen, we need your author bio by tomorrow. After she leaves, I return to chopping hazelnuts. The rhythm helps me think. I'm rewriting my author bio, I say finally. No mention of family culinary traditions or the Asher name. Just my journey. Lindsay nods, looking both relieved and lost. That makes sense. After she leaves, I stand alone in my kitchen as darkness falls outside my window. I pull out the ingredients for my grandmother's apple pie. Granny Smith, apples, cinnamon, nutmeg, and her secret ingredient, a splash of bourbon in the filling. As I roll out the dough, memories flood back standing on a stool beside her, my small hands covered in flour, her patient voice guiding me through the process. This was before Mom decided Lindsay should be the family star, before cooking became about appearance rather than substance. Tears fall onto the countertop as I crimp the edges of the pie, just as my grandmother taught me. I'm not betraying her legacy by standing up for myself. This is how I've always shown love, through food made with care and integrity. The pie goes into the oven as I open my laptop. I begin documenting every text, every social media post, every call from my family attempting to undermine my book release. Chef Thomas has already collected statements from my cooking class students. Diane and her fellow bloggers have screenshots of Lindsay's posts claiming collaborative recipe development. I work until midnight, compiling everything into a comprehensive press kit that tells my true culinary journey. My phone buzzes with a text from Margaret. Package arrived for you at the office, marked personal. Bringing it tomorrow. The next morning, Margaret arrives with a sealed manila envelope. This was sent to the publisher 3 years ago, with instructions to give it to you when your cookbook was ready for publication. My hands tremble as I open it. Inside are dozens of yellowed recipe cards in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. A note sits on top. For Kristen, who truly understands these recipes. I spread the cards across my counter, the original family recipes, some dating back 3 generations. The legitimacy these cards add to my cookbook is beyond value, but it's the validation that brings fresh tears to my eyes. The final card contains her most treasured recipe, bourbon apple pie with rosemary crust. At the bottom, she's written, created by Eleanor Asher, perfected by Kristen Asher. With steady hands, I add it to my manuscript as the book's final page, the past and future of my culinary journey coming full circle. The next day, my phone buzzes with a text from Margaret. The press release has gone live. I set it face up on my kitchen counter, watching notifications flood the screen like water boiling over. For 7 years, I've poured everything into these recipes. Now, finally, people will know they're mine. How's it look? Chef Thomas asks, arranging blackberry crumbles on a serving tray. His restaurant kitchen bustles with staff preparing for tonight's preview dinner. Perfect, I say, checking my watch. Food critics arrive in an hour. Better than when I made it at home. Thomas snorts. Not possible. Your recipes translate beautifully to professional kitchens. That's rare, Kristen. I slide advance copies of my cookbook from their shipping box, each with a handwritten note tucked inside. My fingers trace the cover where my name appears above the title. From my kitchen, a heritage of Northwestern flavors. Below it, a photo of my grandmother's handwritten recipe cards. Their edges worn from decades of use. Your grandmother would be proud, Thomas says, noticing my lingering touch. Before I can respond, my phone rings. Diane, they're scrambling, she says without greeting. Your mother arranged some last-minute cookbook announcement for Lindsay at Hartley's bookshop. My stomach tightens. When? Tomorrow. They're calling it Family Table, the Asher legacy of Northwestern cuisine. I close my eyes, counting breaths. They actually think they can still pull this off? The journalist from Portland Monthly tested one of their sample recipes. Complete disaster. The proportions were all wrong. Diane's laugh has a sharp edge. Lindsay couldn't explain why the baking temperature was so high, said something about creative interpretation of traditional methods. She always did think cooking was about appearances, not technique. Your father tried threatening the publisher with legal action. How'd that go? Your copyright documentation shut that down fast. Margaret says their lawyer looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. The kitchen door swings open as waitstaff file in for final instructions. I need to focus. I'll call you after the preview dinner. I promise. Thomas claps his hands, gathering his team. Tonight, he announces, we're featuring recipes from Portland's most authentic new cookbook. The author happens to be with us tonight. Warmth spreads through my chest as his staff turns toward me with genuine interest. No family pressure, no manipulation, just professional respect. My phone vibrates again. A local radio station has posted their morning interview with Lindsay. I press play. These recipes represent our family traditions, Lindsay says, her voice polished from years of practice. Then the host asks about technique for the hazelnut chicken. Lindsay stumbles. Well, that's actually, the recipes were always Kristen's strength. I focused more on presentation and I shut it off, a bitter smile pulling at my lips. The truth slips out when she's cornered with actual cooking questions. The preview dinner unfolds like a dream. Each course brings appreciative murmurs, notes jotted in small books, photographs taken of plating. Chef Thomas introduces me before dessert, and I speak briefly about my journey. When I mention my grandmother's handwritten recipe cards given to me because she recognized who truly understood their heart, the room grows quiet, attentive. No mention of my parents. No mention of Lindsay. Just my voice, my journey, my recipes. Later that night, notifications continue to ping. Margaret forwards an email showing pre-orders exceeding projections. Chef Thomas's Instagram post featuring my seafood stew has gone semi-viral in local food circles. 3 cooking blogs have published supportive pieces, each mentioning the questionable competing announcement from the Asher family. Morning brings more validation. A regional morning show wants me to demonstrate techniques next week. A national cooking magazine requests a feature article written by me, not about me. Then my phone rings. Lindsay. I never wanted to be a cookbook author anyway, she says, her voice small. I say nothing, letting silence fill the space between us. The vanity press dropped our project, she continues. Dad's furious. Mom's locked herself in her room. Still, I wait. We need to discuss how to move forward, Lindsay says, carefully choosing words that sound like our mother's. No, you need to decide if you're ready to tell the truth, I reply, my voice steadier than I expected. My cookbook launches next week. My website goes live tomorrow. My culinary voice is finally being heard. Kristen. I've spent years being invisible in this family. Never again. After hanging up, I open my laptop to check final proofs for my website. Professional photos show me working in the kitchen, testing recipes, teaching classes. My bio mentions culinary influences without a single reference to my family. A new email arrives from my publisher Advanced Reviews calling my writing authentic and passionately knowledgeable. I run my fingers over my grandmother's handwritten note one more time. For Kristen, who truly understands these recipes. For the first time, I fully believe it. The cookbook sits beside me, my name embossed on the cover. 7 years of work. My history. My future. Mine. I pick up 3 copies and write brief inscriptions inside each. One for Mom, one for Dad, one for Lindsay. Not seeking approval, not expecting apologies. Simply stating facts. These recipes were always mine. Now everyone knows it. I may not have won my family, but I've reclaimed something more important, my voice, my work, my story. The ingredients of a life that belongs entirely to me. On the book promotion day, Tuesday next week, I scan the packed venue from behind the curtain, clutching my grandmother's recipe cards. Chef Thomas gives my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. We've got a full house, he says. Your moment of triumph. Then I see them seated front row center like honored guests. My mother Patricia, her pearl necklace catching the light. My father Robert in his best blazer. And Lindsay, looking smaller somehow, her eyes darting around the room. My stomach tightens. What are they doing here? Chef Thomas follows my gaze. They arrived early, insisted on front row seats, said their family. Before I can respond, Margaret hurries over. Kristen, we need to start in 5. Are you ready? I nod, but my confidence wavers. They shouldn't be here. Not after everything. As I make final preparations at the side of the stage, I feel a presence beside me. Patricia, her smile tight and practiced. Darling, what a wonderful turnout, she says, voice honeyed for potential eavesdroppers. Your father and I are so proud. I continue arranging my presentation materials. Why are you here? She leans closer, her perfume overwhelming. This family stood by you for years. You owe us acknowledgement. I meet her eyes. I owe you nothing. Be reasonable, Kristen. Her voice drops. We raised you, supported your hobby. A simple thank you in your speech costs you nothing. Robert appears at her side. There could be family legal action if we're excluded entirely from your narrative. He says, straightening his tie. Think carefully about what you say up there. Before I can respond, Lindsay approaches, hanging back slightly from our parents. Kristen, please, she says, voice barely above a whisper. We're family. Can't we heal this through some shared credit? Everyone makes mistakes. Mistakes? I repeat. You tried to steal 7 years of my work. Patricia's hand grips my wrist. Your grandmother would be heartbroken to see you reject your family this way. The mention of my grandmother sends a surge of heat through my chest. I pull away from her grasp. Don't you dare bring her into this. A staff member signals it's time. I walk away from them, leaving their expectations hanging in the air. As I step onto the stage, applause washes over me. The bright lights momentarily blind me, but when my vision clears, I see my family seated front and center, Patricia's confident smile beaming up at me. For a heartbeat, I hesitate. My grandmother's handwritten recipe cards sit before me on the podium. I run my finger over her familiar script, and suddenly I know exactly what to say. Authenticity, I begin, my voice steady, is the most important ingredient in any recipe. The room quiets. I launch into my presentation, highlighting my culinary journey from my first childhood attempts at baking, to culinary school, to the years spent perfecting each recipe in my book. As I speak, I watch my mother's smile falter. I acknowledge every person who supported me, Chef Thomas for his mentorship, Margaret for her editorial brilliance, the local farmers who provided ingredients, my test kitchen volunteers. I name them all, deliberately and conspicuously omitting my immediate family. And most importantly, I continue, holding up a stack of yellowed recipe cards, I want to acknowledge the true inspiration behind this cookbook, my grandmother Eleanor. A hush falls over the audience as I read aloud. For Kristen, who truly understands these recipes, my grandmother wrote these words before she passed, entrusting me with our family's culinary heritage. Patricia shifts in her seat. Robert's jaw tightens. The slideshow behind me displays photos of my journey, me at 22, in my first apartment kitchen, burns on my arms from testing the seafood stew. Me at 25, winning my first cooking competition. Screenshots of my detailed recipe development logs, all time-stamped, all documented. Chef Thomas takes the microphone next. I've watched Kristen develop these recipes over years, he tells the audience. Her voice in the culinary world is unmistakably her own. Margaret follows, describing the quality of my original manuscript, the authenticity that jumped off every page. With each testimony, my family sinks lower in their seats. When I return to the podium, I take a deep breath. I need to address some recent confusion regarding the origins of this cookbook. I say, my voice calm but firm. These recipes represent my personal journey, my late nights, my burns and cuts. They were never a collaborative family project. Murmurs ripple through the crowd. Some heads turn toward my family. In the spirit of supporting others, finding their authentic culinary voice, I'm announcing the Eleanor Marsh Culinary Scholarship for Struggling Chefs. I pause, letting the significance of using my grandmother's maiden name sink in. Because true family supports your journey, not just your success. The room erupts in applause. Patricia's rigid smile crumbles completely. Robert stands, taking her elbow, and escorts her from the room mid-presentation. Their abrupt exit draws more curious glances, but Lindsay remains seated. Through the stage lights, I see tears streaming down her face as she slowly joins the applause. After the presentation, a long line forms for book signings. Chef Thomas, Margaret, and Diane hover nearby, beaming with pride. For hours, I sign copies, chat with readers, and accept congratulations. As the venue empties, I gather my things, exhausted but exhilarated. Then I notice her, Lindsay, waiting at the end of the now empty signing table, a copy of my cookbook clutched against her chest. Our eyes meet across the quiet space. She approaches hesitantly. "I didn't deserve a copy," she says, "but I bought one anyway." I cap my pen, watching her. "Is there any way to fix what we broke?" she asks, her voice small in the cavernous room. I study my sister's face, familiar features arranged in an expression I've rarely seen, genuine remorse. "That depends," I say finally, "on what you're willing to admit." Sunlight streams through the wide windows of my new test kitchen, casting golden rectangles across the polished countertops. I run my fingers along the cool marble surface, still unable to believe this space belongs to me. 6 months ago, I was testing recipes in my cramped apartment, hunched over a wobbly table salvaged from a yard sale. Now, framed reviews of my cookbook line one wall, the centerpiece being the glowing write-up from the New York Times calling me a refreshing voice of culinary authenticity. The timer chimes, and I slide on oven mitts to retrieve my hazelnut chicken, the dish that started everything. The aroma fills the room, rich with wild mushrooms and herbs. I'm plating the 6th course for tonight's dinner when the doorbell rings. Chef Thomas arrives first, bearing a bottle of champagne. Margaret follows with a bouquet of fresh herbs instead of flowers. Diane hugs me warmly, whispering congratulations about my 2nd cookbook contract. One by one, they fill my dining room with laughter and genuine admiration. Only one chair remains empty. When the doorbell rings again, conversations pause. I wipe my hands on my apron and open the door to find Lindsay standing alone, clutching a small package, her knuckles white with tension. "The food's getting cold. Come in," I say, stepping aside. The table settings echo that terrible day in our parents' dining room, my recipes displayed for all to see. But this time, each dish bears my name, each plate represents my journey. Lindsay's eyes dart around the room, taking in the success I've built without our family. "This is incredible, Kristen," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. I can actually taste the story in each bite. Chef Thomas raises his glass. "To Kristen's 2nd cookbook pre-orders already outpacing the 1st. And to the online community," Diane adds. 10,000 home cooks now following your techniques." Lindsay shifts in her seat. "I've been seeing someone," she says during a lull. "A therapist. She's helping me understand how Mom and Dad shaped us both." Her fingers trace the edge of her plate. "I spent so long trying to be what they wanted that I never figured out what I actually enjoy." I nod, remembering my own journey. It took losing their approval for me to realize I never really had it. Not for being myself, anyway. "I found this," Lindsay says, sliding the small package across the table. Inside is our grandmother's antique cookie cutter, shaped like a maple leaf. "This always belonged with you." I took it when Mom said we needed to build my culinary credibility. I hold the cookie cutter, feeling its familiar weight. "What will you do now?" "I don't know," she admits. "Everything I've done has been their idea, including taking your recipes." I study my sister's face, seeing genuine confusion there. "You know, your food styling is actually excellent. I know someone who needs that skill for a project." "You'd help me? After everything?" "Your visual sense with my recipes. It could work if we're honest about who brings what to the table." The next morning, I stand alone in my kitchen, arranging grandmother's recipe cards beside my published cookbook. In the window glass, I catch my reflection no longer hunched or uncertain, but standing tall. I begin mixing ingredients for something new, my movements confident and purposeful. This kitchen, these recipes, this life all created on my terms. The betrayal that nearly broke me became the foundation for something stronger, something true. And truth, I've learned, is the most essential ingredient of all.